Well, welcome back. This is number 5 of our What is God Like series under the banner of Pilgrims Progress. And we're looking at the question of hardship and difficulty here on planet Earth and our connection with God in all of this. Today I'd like to just consider the issue of faith. And let's just, if we can, just read from Luke chapter 18, verse 8. Jesus is talking, and he talks about his return to planet Earth, his second coming. And he said, "Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth?" And I recently read a number of stories about people who've fallen away from the faith because they have not really been able to understand what is taking place and why God is not helping them through some of the issues and dilemmas that they face. If I can read to you from Hebrews 11, verse 6, it also says, "And without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him." So essentially there are two areas that we've come across in trying to understand why bad things are happening. The one is that the belief that God should only bad things should only happen to the unjust. In other words, because we are believers in Christ, nothing bad should actually happen to us. That's the first error. And the second one is that God would go along with and even sponsor evil, that good may come out of it or whatever. So those are the two areas that we've found. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at Job. It's an interesting book, and many people would say that Job is actually a book of suffering or about suffering, and certainly suffering is a major ingredient within it. But the book goes way beyond suffering. Suffering is the ingredient of the book, very much like a cake would be for an egg would be for a cake, that it's just part of the ingredient. And so what we're going to do is just have a look at Job and consider the aspect of faith. Now we find, if we read through Job, particularly the first two chapters, you'll find that Job was blameless and upright. He was a prosperous man. Everything was going well for him. He was blameless and upright. He had a beautiful family, great wealth. And then we find that there was this collapse. He lost everything, got to the stage even where his health was compromised. He had boils and he was suffering badly. And so the question then was, where was God in all of this? And so his friends come along and they apply religious wisdom. A lot of the argument that they had is that because bad is happening to you, Job, then you're bad. There's something wrong with you and God is punishing you for that. And that is almost the wisdom of many today. The old the Hebrew, the Jews, they had that kind of understanding too. We see that in John 9, where Jesus is going along. There's a man who's blind, and the disciples say, "Who sinned, this man or his parents?" So in other words, they're trying to apportion blame or guilt because they believe that if bad things are happening, then you must be the problem. Where it's not like that at all. And that's the problem with our thinking, is where things are happening, and we're always saying, "Well, God, why are you doing this to me?" Whereas we find here in this book of Job, it clarifies that as well. So it's interesting, the first two chapters of Job. Job is not aware of what has taken place here. He starts off in chapter 3, where he's prosperous, living a good life. Then all of a sudden, everything is stripped away from him. Calamity comes and he loses it all. And so we find here in chapter 1 and 2, there's this discussion between God and Satan. And Satan comes to God and he says to him, "Job is only serving you because of what you give him." In other words, you're not worth being served because you're God. You're only worth being served because of the blessing that you give him. So let's just read in Job chapter 1. If I read from verse 6, and you'll see this unfold. It says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, 'From where have you come?' And Satan answered the Lord and said, 'From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it.' And the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man?'" So God found him blameless and upright, who fears God and turns away from evil. And then Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for no reason? Now, here comes the punchline. Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? Have you blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land? But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. And of course, then Job loses everything. So here's this discussion between Satan and God. And Satan is accusing God. He's saying, God, the only reason you are worth worshipping is because you bless people. And that is so true today. That's why the prosperity message is such a dangerous one. Because people are in it for what they can get. And ultimately God is saying, no, Job loves me. He believes in me. He has faith in me. And therefore, if you take everything away, he will still continue to believe in me. And so then we go into chapter 3 and onwards, and we find how Job's friends come and they try to reason with Job and say, Job, perhaps you have done something wrong. And it goes on like that. But Job, right the way through, holds on to his faith. And he doesn't lose his faith in any way. And then right at the end, we find God comes in. And again, interestingly, God doesn't explain why these things have happened. He doesn't give Job the answers that we saw in chapters 1 and 2. Job is ignorant of that. And what God does is he comes in and he then says to him, where were you, Job, when all of this was formed? What counsel can you give me? What wisdom can you give me? And Job had to say, Lord, you have to forgive me. He said, I was trying to reason this thing through, but I trust you. I believe in you. So a priest once said that people love God the way a peasant loves a cow. People love God the way a peasant loves cows. And that is because the cow would give them meat and milk and that sort of thing. And so what he's saying is that people love God only because God can bless. And why do you think, for instance, the Hindus have so many different gods? They're looking for different gods to bless them. Or the question is, do you and I serve and love God for who he is, or do we serve and love God because of what he would do for us? Do we love God for who he is or for what we get? And so we find many people's faith is shaken when bad things happen. I was rocked when we lost our second child. I was devastated, and I railed against God. And then I began to try to work it out. Where is this? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Is this abundant life, or is it have we been robbed here? And so Satan claims that Job has got conditional love for God. You take away the positive, and what's left? And if all you have left is God, would you still worship him and love him? And so Satan was actually saying to God, you're not worth worshipping. People only love and serve you because of what they get out of you. So there's a central theme out of all of this. And we're going to try to move on to some of the answers in these things, or some of the perceived answers that I would have, and the things that I've been able to work through myself. But the central theme in this is how we respond really matters. How we respond. And for Job, it was a crucial victory. I would like to just read to you from this little book of mine. It says the central theme of Job was how we respond matters. By hanging onto the thinnest thread of faith, Job won a crucial victory in God's grand plan to redeem the earth. In his grace, God has given ordinary men and women the dignity of participating in the redemption of the cosmos. He's allowing us, through obedience to him, to help reverse the pain and unfairness of the world that Job describes so eloquently. So that's encouraging for me, and we'll examine that in a little more detail in terms of how do we respond. Is it wrong to question why, or what should we be asking? Where do we go from here? How do we live in this planet with such hardship and grief and suffering? And I would also like to do a session on just loving and caring for people, for instance, who've lost a loved one. We often make so many mistakes in that. We keep talking when we shouldn't talk at all. And so we'll move into those things as well. So may God richly bless you, and we'll chat again. Goodbye.